I'm Alex and welcome to Pro Car Show. And today we're going to be doing something slightly different and we're going to spice it up. And we're going to do a motorcycle review on this Yamaha MT-09. So on this review we're doing something slightly different, as I said in the intro. Normally we're doing it on cars, this time we're going to be doing it on a bike. So we're going to try and spice things up, try and add more content and more, just branch out a little bit. So today we're going to be doing a review on this 2013 MT-09. Now this Roadster that come from obviously Yamaha is a replacement for the FZ series. So like the phasers and bits and bobs like that. This was their Yamaha's step up to the Roadster world and to compete with Z800s and Z750s and other like GSX-S models from Suzuki. Now this bike is fitted with a 3-cylinder inline 3. This is the CP3 engine, 850cc. It has 115 brake horsepower and 64.5 foot-pounds of torque. Now, the torque doesn't sound like loads, but this is a very light bike. This is weighing in wet at 188 kilograms. So, you picture having high up bars and a load of torque, a flat line on the old dyno graph. This is just power from down low, and it just doesn't ever fade off. It's just power throughout, and this makes this bike a very fun bike out on the road. Now we'll walk around and we'll make our way to like the suspension, because this was a big thing on the first gen Yamaha MT-09s. The suspension was very vague feeling, you couldn't get much of a feel, it was very soft, and just didn't give you that much confidence around corners, because you couldn't really feel what was going on. This model has been changed. This one's got Matrix upgraded front cartridges, which are fully adjustable. The rear shock has been swapped out for it's not really an upgrade, it's just a Yamaha shock from a newer series, which I think is from the Gen 2, so it's got more adjustment on it, not like the MT-07s, which got about nothing on it apart from preload. And so this has 21,000 miles on the clock. Now for a bike, some people might think that's a lot, some people might think that's nothing, and it rides just like it's brand new. It's smooth, it's very quiet because it's still got the boring exhaust on it, which is just a massive catalytic converter at the end of the day. So it's pretty boring to look at. But the styling of the Yamaha all over, there's a lot of plastics going on. Then you've got your tank pads, you've got a lot of, it's very plasticky in places. It's not your typical Honda. Your Honda is a bit more refined in places, but there's a lot going on with the looks of the engine. I mean, the covers, you know, it's got the aftermarket sump protector, got the aftermarket engine cover, but it does look like a tidy Roadster to try and compete with some of these other bikes that are out there. Now, it's got monoblock calipers, which are absolutely great at, sorry, not monoblock, it's Brembo, but it's got radial calipers which are great for not stoppies, well, not for me anyway, but stopping. And it's a very good bike to ride. So we've got masses of comfort. This seat is huge. It is massive, and it's super squidgy. Bars are nice and high, so when you're upright, as I'll show, when you sit on the bike and you sit down, it's an upright position. Handlebars are high and close to you. Some people might not like that. Some people might like a bit more aggressive feel, which you might end up going for like a Z8, Z-Fowl or something. Or if you do like this bike and you like how it rides, you can always get flat bars, so it gives you that bit more aggressive stance and feel. This is a very light bike, so you're wheeling around most of the time. But if you've been looking at these MT-09s, then you know what they're capable of. Obviously this is a boring sounding one because it's standard, but it's a well looked after standard bike, and it's very comfortable to ride. 2.5 hours without getting off, spirited driving, and it was comfortable as anything. And yeah, so I mean, it's got a couple of little extras, things like the sump, the radiator covers, cap, engine cover, it's got tail tidy. So this one's got Yamaha own extras. This is not like it's been molested by some 17-year-old with his dad's credit card. This is like a quite clean example. Performance silicone hoses, and that's it. It's not been mapped or anything. The throttle in A mode is quite snatchy. I like calling it ASBO mode because it is literally on or off. B mode is for rain, or the equivalent to being rain mode, and it's not got traction control, but it dims the power delivery down to being smoother. Standard's okay, still a bit snatchy. You can get a ECU flash which will clean all that throttle up, and probably claw in about 6 brake horsepower or something, if you're lucky. You can do airbox mods to these. You can do lots of performance things, full system, and squeeze everything you can out of the engine. But if you want to get the best map, it's got to be the wall race tune, which is that'll give you. You can get auto blipper for it. Obviously, you'd want a slipper clutch fitted, because at the moment it's just got a standard clutch. But if you fitted a slipper, you could get an auto blipper, quick shifter, get launch control, get a pit lane limiter. Your throttle will be smooth, the power curve will still be smooth, and it would make the bike even more of a hooligan bike as it is. Now, you might be thinking, oh, it's a pretty boring bike to look at. Well, to some people yes, to some people no. So when I first looked at it, I thought, doesn't look as good as the second gen. The third gen, we're not going to go there. Pretty ugly looking bike. But the second gen, with that bug looking headlight, looked much nicer than the round headlight. But then this one's better in the dark, because the second gen is like a laser, LED laser, and it doesn't really flood the corners when you're in the dark. But this bike can go through a lot. This is fitted with Power 5s, which are one of the stickiest tyres out on the road that you can get. And they give you, optimal performance and great wear. Not as good as the road 5s, but it's all down to personal preference if you want a hard couplers or a soft couplers, and what you're going to be using it for. Now, the storage on this thing, well, what storage? It's pathetic. There's nothing to it, and we'll show you that in a second. But it's a very quiet bike, so if we start her up, you'll hear a little whistle, and that'll be just the airbox and the general engine doing the whistle, and then it's just a quiet exhaust. So that's a cold start, idles up high. Not too sure how that went on the audio, but it will either come through clear or not. This bike has been replaced by obviously the Gen 2 and the Gen 3. The Gen 2 came out in 2017, the Gen 3 came out in 2021, I think. So the Gen 2, let's talk about the differences between the Gen 1 and Gen 2 and which one would suit you better. So the Gen 1, as all most Gen 1s of any bike, have their issues. Doesn't matter if it's an Aprilia RSV Mini with stator problems, to a Suzuki having stator problems, or to a ZFL having gearbox issues. It really doesn't matter. Gen 1 seems to always have problems, and they get refined and refined and more refined as the generations go on. So on this one, this model was suspension was a big letdown. Minimal adjustment on the rear, like no damping effect on the front. It was just really poorly designed. Obviously the suspension is outsourced from Yamaha. It was just kind of like, computerised to say, yeah, it will work. Obviously it didn't work. A lot of people have moaned. So we'll look at the differences of the Gen 1 and Gen 2 of like buying guides, because I would say if you want something cheap that is exactly the same engine as the Gen 2 and will ride very similar, I would say get a Gen 1 with the upgraded front suspension, because you can get these for like £3,000, £4,000 cheaper than Gen 2. So you're better off buying one of these, and if you can get a Gen with the forks already done, saves you £1,000. If you can get one with the rear shock done, saves you £1,500–1,600. And you know, there's loads of suspension you could pick from. As I said, this has got a matrix on the front, it's just got a standard on the rear, but you could go full nitron, you could go full matrix, you could go full Öhlins, it doesn't really matter. But if you're buying one, I would, one, go test ride, but I would highly advise getting a Gen 1, because if you can get the one with the suspension done, it saves you money, and you'll save them money. I'm sure there's a headlight conversion for the Gen 2 out there, so if you're really down on looks and it's the Gen 2 headlight, then you might be worth looking. Is it worth spending 250 quid on the headlight and getting custom made brackets, or is it worth paying that 3–4 grand extra for the headlight? You know, it makes more sense on an older bike just to get the headlight. I mean, even if you bought a 2016 model and a 2017 model, or even if you put private plates on it, no one's going to know. Put a headlight on it, no one would even question it. The only thing they might question is the back end, because on the Gen 2 the back end is 30mm smaller. This has got an FZ08 rear light conversion, so on normal ones they stick out a little bit. This one's like a more of a flush one. But if you can get one that's been looked after, this has been well looked after. They had this front suspension done because the guy did touring on it, and it's not been abused. It's got all the keys, all the history. It is quite a good bike kind of thing. But I think if you were going to get a Gen 2, I think you'd be more spending it for the headlight. Oh, and the slipper clutch. It does have a slipper clutch, but the Gen 1s do suffer with a clutch basket issue, which is the rubber dampers between the clutch basket and the clutch boss. So you can go to places, you can get a billet basket upgrade, and the billet basket, you remove your boss, replace the rubbers, put the basket back in, screw it all together, and you can add a slipper clutch. Now to fit a slipper clutch in this model would set you back around about £650 to £700, and you can do it yourself. All easy stuff. If you're like a bit handy with some spanners, it's an easy job. It'll probably take you no more than probably like 3 hours. It is quite a simple process, and the places that do these billet baskets do provide fitting instructions and a video walkthrough of how to fit them, which makes it a lot easier. And then you can go for a full quick shifter up and down, a quick shifter up or an auto blipper down, or you can just, if you're happy with not doing anything, you don't want the slipper clutch, you don't want to pay any more, then just have a quick shifter. It would make your life so much easier. It would make you more of a hooligan with an auto blipper and a clutch quick shifter, knowing that you can just bang it down for 3 years and you haven't got to worry about the back wheel locking up. So there's lots of modifications you can do to these. You might see there's like crash cages, there's stunt cages, there's all sorts people have done to these. You can take the airbox out, cut the funnel down, put a new filter in, stick it back in, and try and draw more power out that side. But all in all, I think if you want a non-molested bike, you're going to be paying around about £4.5 grand, and if you're wanting a Gen 2 that's an unmolested, you're going to be paying around £7. Tyres aren't cheap, but what tyres aren't cheap? Are cheap, unless you get Chinese ones that run out after 30 miles. I mean, it's quite a cheap bike to maintain. It's a service a year, or every 7,000 miles or something like that. But if you're only riding for 100 miles a weekend, even if you only use it for the summer, then you're better off just sticking with a service a year. Obviously, a big service is your valve clearances, but that's like any bike. Same as any car, going to get cam belt. So only every couple of years. Same as a valve clearance, might be every 16,000 miles, every 18,000 miles. But no, this is a good example of what an MT-09 2013 is.